Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Educational Equity webinar, Leading with Transparency, C-Suites Insights. I'm so excited for all of you to join us today. This session follows our annual Inclusive Leadership Summit, where we delve deep into the crucial role of transparency and how it plays in creating genuine sense of belonging within organizations. In today's session, we have the privilege of hearing from two exceptional chief executive leaders who have personally impacted my world here at University of Phoenix as a practitioner in diversity, equity, and inclusion. They'll be sharing their personal stories, journeys, and strategies they've employed to lead transparently and inclusively. We'll explore how they've fostered environments where everyone feels valued and respected, especially during times of leadership transitions amidst the challenges posed by the pandemic and societal unrest. So whether you're an experienced leader or just starting out, I believe you will find this conversation valuable. So definitely pull out your notebooks, take notes, think about how you can apply these strategies within your own spheres of influence as a leader. Next slide. Before we proceed, let me introduce myself. My name is Saray Lopez. I'm a director here in the Office of Educational Equity. My pronouns are she, her, ella in Spanish. I'm a woman of Mexican heritage with olive skin and hazel eyes. My black hair is pulled back into a bun. Today, I am wearing a black blouse and I'm standing at my desk with a bookcase fairly empty, but it's there more for decoration purposes than anything else. I have the honor of hosting this monthly webinar series with my colleague, Tondra Richardson, fellow director in this office. And this webinar series was designed to foster a learning environment where we may explore paths to empower individual action for greater unity and societal transformation. These conversations are a priority at University of Phoenix because we serve working adults across all industries in which 56% of these students identify as members of historically underrepresented communities. Hence, throughout these webinars, we facilitate thought-provoking conversations to promote the practice of inclusive leadership in today's culturally complex society. So let's start with our land acknowledgement. Next slide. We would like to begin by acknowledging the original inhabitants of the lands on which we're standing. While we do meet virtually, I invite you to join me to honor and give gratitude to the Indigenous peoples who have been stewards of the various lands we each call home. We do recognize that a land acknowledgement alone is insufficient, yet it serves as a starting point as we continue our individual journeys towards racial equity. Here in Phoenix metropolitan area, we inhabit the Hohokam, Akimel-O'odham, Pipash, and Yavapai lands. Thank you all for joining us and taking time to honor the original custodians of the lands in which we stand. Next slide, thank you. So as we navigate through July, it is important to recognize and celebrate various cultural heritage and awareness days. This month, we acknowledge Disability Pride Month. And if you have any other significant dates we might have missed or additional events that align within the month of July, please share them in the chat and make sure that you do include links to resources where we can all go and learn more about their significance. Next slide. So now let's set the stage for our conversation today. Here are some guidelines to help us foster a respectful and productive conversation. Perhaps expect moments of discomfort. It's natural to feel uneasy at times. Use these moments to reflect on your own assumptions and perceptions. Practice compassion. Do remember we all make mistakes. Be kind to others and to yourself, and do trust that greater truths often emerge through diverse perspectives. If something offends you, make sure to keep in mind that to criticize the idea, not the individual. Take a step back, pause, and learn. We all know that through uncomfortable moments, that's where growth happens. So let's join this conversation and grow together in our own journey towards racial equity. We do encourage you to share your experiences and perspectives in the chat, contribute to mutual and respectful conversations, and connect with one another. Share your LinkedIn profile, provide resources that are related to today's topic. And if you do have questions, we encourage you to add them to the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we'll address those as time allows at the end of the session. Next slide. Now it's my absolute pleasure to introduce my colleague, Tondra Richardson, who will be moderating today's discussion. You all have met her if you've joined these sessions in the past, but let me give you a little bit more insight into Tondra's background. Tondra is a director in the Office of Educational Equity at University of Phoenix, where she provides leadership, training, and management. This office is situated within the Department of Accessibility, Equity, and Inclusion, and it's focused to serve students, alumni, community, and alliances. With over 20 years, and yes, 20 years, although she does look like she's barely 20 years old, but she has over 20 years of experience in higher education. Tondra's expertise extends to conflict resolution and risk management. She's a certified diversity and inclusion practitioner and has completed Cornell's University Diversity and Inclusion Certificate Program. Tondra is also involved with several boards and councils, including the Diversity Leadership Alliance and the Advisory Council for the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity. Her impressive accolades include the Diversity Leadership Alliance and Arizona Society for Human Resource Management Volunteer of the Year, and has been recognized as a leading woman in higher education by Diverse Issues in Higher Education. And that's just to name a few. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to Tondra to lead us through today's enlightening conversation.
Thank you, Saray. What a wonderful introduction. I will describe myself for all of our participants, although I want to stick with what Saray shared and saying that I barely look 20 years old, because that's probably the best compliment I can get amongst all of the other items that she listed in my bio. But I am an African-American woman. I have my hair pulled up in a bun. My hair is black. I'm wearing a pink blazer with a black top and large jeweled earrings. I am very excited to be here with you all today and serve as your moderator. I want to start by introducing our highly esteemed guests today. First, we have Chris Lynn, who is our university president. He was named the president of the university in December of 2022. He works collaboratively with the senior leadership team to further accelerate the university-wide vision to be recognized as the most trusted provider of career-relevant higher education for working adults. He supports the university's focus on continuous relentless improvement to maximize the value we offer to our students and brings an operations mindset to the role, serving as a strategic partner to all areas of the university to facilitate and expedite our return to growth. A seasoned executive in higher education, Chris's earlier career included roles as Senior Vice President of Finance, Chief Accounting Officer, and Head of Shared Services for Education Management Corporation. Moving to Arizona, he joined North Central University in a dual Chief Financial Officer and Chief Operating Officer role. During his tenure at North Central, he helped the institution achieve a reaffirmation of accreditation with the Higher Learning Commission. He led a successful recapitalization effort and transformed the finance organization into a key strategic partner to the institution. He went on to serve in subsequent roles as president and chief operating office of Hot Chalk, an online program management company, founded Transcend Education Group, and served as Chief Financial Officer at Cadence Education. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Accounting from Purdue University and a Master of Business Administration from the Booth School of Business at University of Chicago. We also have with us today Peter Cohen. He's a recently retired senior executive who has held leadership positions across multiple education businesses spanning pre-K through adult learning. He now serves as a board member to 5 pre-K grade education companies and as senior advisor for Boston Consulting Group. What a retirement, right? From 2017 to 2022, Peter was the president of University of Phoenix. As we stated before, one of the largest adult serving online university in the country, where he focused on the commitment to improve graduation rates and increase career services for our adult students. Prior to that, from 2013 to 2017, Peter was the group president for North America at McGraw-Hill Education. There, he led the learning services and curriculum for both K through 12 and higher education. Following their purchase by Apollo Global Management, he previously was the CEO for Pearson's K through 12 curriculum and charter school business from 2008 to 2013, where he led the expansion of digital curriculum and services. Peter began his education career at Sylvan Learning, the leading tutoring business in the U.S., where he was the president and CEO for Sylvan and Educate Incorporated from 1996 to 2008. Before serving in leadership roles in the education industry, Peter was a senior executive at multiple consumer service businesses, ranging from startups to large-scale chains. He earned his BA in business administration from the University of Redlands Johnston College. So we can all give our accessible applause to our speakers for today. I am very excited to kick this off. I do want to say to the over 600 people who have joined us today that while we have 2 University of Phoenix leaders, I want to make sure that everyone understands that we're going to discuss a few topics related to transparent leadership today. Both of these leaders, as I've read their bios, have extreme experience in different industries, including education, but leading through some very trying times. So I encourage you all to listen attentively and just think beyond education. We want to speak to our DEI practitioners. We want to speak to our higher ed colleagues, as well as those who are working in various levels within organizations. So now that I've read each of their bios, I'd now like to ask Chris and Peter if they can each share how their paths have intersected over the years, and then a little about how each of you have had experiences that have really shaped your leadership. So Peter, your mic is off, so I'm going to start with you.
Thanks, Tondra, and thanks for leading these seminars. Oh, God, what's been like 4 years now? It's been incredible. It's been incredible to see them continue to see the growth that's happened as these seminars have taken place. Chris and I didn't actually have any past relationships together. We hadn't crossed paths in higher ed. I became aware of him through an executive search. We were looking for a chief financial officer at the University of Phoenix. And you've heard his background. You couldn't have found anybody more qualified to join the university from an experiential standpoint. What you didn't hear in his background was really the reasons why we thought he was going to be most qualified to join the university. And when you talk to him, you hear his passion for education, his passion for adult learners, his breadth of experience in both large and small organizations that were as large and larger than the University of Phoenix and startups. And the fact that he'd also been experienced in not only the financial side, but also on the operating side of the business. So I was looking for somebody who had a broad range of experience to join the university, but more importantly, with the values that Chris had. We were looking for somebody who could fit into a team that was already pretty well entrenched in the university. And Chris was one of the later arrivals to the university. So we wanted somebody who shared that collaborative approach to leadership. And Chris certainly embodied that. He had the passion for education and he had the skills that we needed. I should mention that it wasn't just my decision to have Chris join the university. It was the entire senior leadership team interviewed Chris We had one of these group interviews, and to a person, they all agreed that he was the right candidate out of the candidates that we come in for final interview. So no prior experience with Chris, but thrilled that he came on as our CFO, and even more thrilled that he was my successor as the president for the university. And it's clear that we put the university in great hands.
Well, thanks, Peter. I guess I'll take it from there. So yeah, Peter and I met when I was hired here. And it's interesting, you made me remember the interview process. And I think that really speaks to a little bit of what we'll talk about, which is transparency. This wasn't done in a vacuum. I met the whole executive team and spent a whole afternoon with the executive team. They gave me a bunch of really helpful information, gave me 3 days and asked me to be at McKinsey and talk about where we were going to go as a university. And then I proceeded to get grilled by the entire team. And that day was no different than any day since I began with the university. We have a very open, transparent team. And that's really, when I think of Peter, even this webinar is sort of symbolic of filling large shoes. Peter may not have heard, but they were talking as we were preparing that it was almost like a celebrity was joining today because Peter was going to be on. But I'll tell you, that was the toughest part of the transition into this role. You may ask that down the road. It was really stepping into Peter's shoes. And, he did an exceptional job of really creating trust and transparency in the organization. I think our values, which were before me, but Peter introduced brave, honest, and focused. We really live them. And when I think about working with Peter, what I learned a lot is we had a very consistent style. So, he hired, I think he saw that. I'm a transparent leader. I've been that way as an executive for over 15 years. I understand the power of being consistent, and so I've always, in a mission-driven organization, especially when you're having the same conversation with the board and the executive team and the employees, it's comfortable. We're all here to advance the mission. So I knew the power of transparency, and that was natural. But one thing I was thinking as we were preparing for this that I'd like to share is something I learned from Peter, and he may not even know this, but it's something that has really signified a lot of my focus. I'm sort of building on this in the role, and it was learning to be vulnerable. One thing that I really didn't do in my career was let my guard down often. So I had no problem talking about the institution and the mission and trying to get people excited, but letting my guard down was not easy. And I remember when we went through COVID together as a university, and we were all on Zoom, and Peter kept encouraging me to talk about my experience. So I had a really tough experience, like pneumonia. I had a clot in my lung, and felt very lucky to get through that experience. And Peter really encouraged me, and I kind of remember at the time thinking, like, why does he really wants me to do this, and I really don't want to do this. But I'll tell you, that was a big catalyst for me as a leader, to share that experience, to realize how helpful it was to a lot of people who themselves or their family were struggling with pretty significant challenges around COVID. But also just the level of connection. Like I made a much deeper connection. I mean, there were hundreds of people reaching out to me after that experience. And so that's been a big takeaway. And I thank Peter for that. And I think that's something that we've seen more of over the years is our leaders, not just the executive team, but in general in this organization, be comfortable being vulnerable. And really building on that culture that Peter sort of laid the foundation for.
Thank you, Chris. That was great. I think one of the common themes in what you said, and one of the initial messages that we can try and convey here is that having a sense of vulnerability and humility when you're a leader in an organization really helps to get buy-in from your employees and your staff, because it humanizes you. And to Chris's point of us stating that Peter's somewhat of a celebrity That's a great position to be in when you retire, right? Don't you want to leave that legacy of, wow, people are still missing you? And Chris has very effectively stepped into those shoes. So I want to affirm you, Chris, as a staff member here at the university, that I think that you are doing a great job. And Peter has effectively passed the torch. But I do want to go back a little bit because as Chris has shared, I have had some varied experiences at the university and some great experiences under Peter's leadership as well. So as Saray mentioned, I've been with the university for over 20 years. And I have played many different roles. I've been a student. I'm now an alumni, a very proud alumni. I have worked in various departments at the university, and I was adjunct faculty for a period. So I've seen a lot of leaders at the university, and I've been able to see the impact of the leader, both as staff, faculty, and student. And I do call that a privilege to be able to see it from those different lenses, because it also helps me to see how leadership impacts us as staff members, how it impacts faculty members, and ultimately how it impacts your students, customers, or clients. And one of the things that we're really proud of here at the University of Phoenix, and something that I'm hoping that will relay on to others that are attending today, are how we moved through 2020 and all that we were carrying during that period. So we had social unrest that was happening. Diversity, equity, and inclusion has always been important, but suddenly people were more aware of its importance. We also had this global pandemic. Well, many of us didn't know what we were dealing with. In fact, I didn't know all that you were carrying at that time, Chris. So we're happy you're here and healthy after carrying all of that. But one of the things that I will say, as someone who had been in a newly developed role in diversity for only a year, is the way in which we as an institution were able to move through that time, not just from the perspective as a business or as an educational institution, but as a community at the university, when we were all kind of torn apart, but stuck in our homes, but found ways to connect. And as Peter mentioned, we are at about 4 years now with the Educational Equity webinar series. And this is something that my colleague Saray and I were able to pitch to Peter during the pandemic. At a time when people were making statements, a lot of institutions were, expressing empathy, but we were really proud of the ways in which our leadership was invested in taking action. So that leads me into our next question. And Peter, I want to ask you if you can share a little bit about how you successfully led the university through the challenges of 2020, including the global pandemic and the social unrest that we all were experiencing.
Thanks, Tondra. First of all, it wasn't me, it's a team. Let's start with that. On the pandemic side, we were fortunate that being forewarned allowed us to be forearmed. And what I mean by that is we've been having a series of crisis tabletop exercises that were led by our Chief Security Officer at the time, Steve Lindsay, who may still be our Chief Security Officer. But we had a tabletop exercise literally about a month before the pandemic, where we said, what if there's a chemical explosion right outside the University of Phoenix's offices? What do we do? And we said, well, we've got to evacuate the buildings and everybody's got to go home. Well, how would we prepare for that? Well, we'd have to give everybody some methodology to both get online at home, have laptops, be able to take their work home, et cetera. And so we kind of workshopped that issue and we said, well, are we ready for that if that happens? And the answer was not really. Over the next 30 days, Jamie Smith is our Chief Technology Officer, and the rest of the team worked from an IT standpoint. Cheryl Nauman and the HR team worked from a HR standpoint. Everybody, Raghu Krishnaya, worked from an operating standpoint to say, what would we need to do to be ready for a chemical explosion near the office? Well, we had an explosion near the office called COVID, and we had to send everybody home on March 13th. And we were prepared on March 13th. Over the weekend, everybody came in. They picked up laptops or picked up their desktops. We had people take their chairs home. On Monday morning, we were back at work. And frankly, we never missed a beat. If you look at the performance of the university from every single perspective, student engagement, faculty engagement, staff engagement, student outcomes, student retention, graduation rates, enrollments, every single metric continued to improve during that period of time and continues to improve today, years later, while we still basically maintain a remote university. So I think the preparation beforehand and the attitude of the people that we have working at the university allowed us to manage that global crisis very well. The challenges with social unrest were a little more difficult. They were difficult for everybody across the country. We were seeing things happen that had continued to happen over time. And I go back to Freddie Gray in Baltimore, which was a few years before that, and Trayvon Martin in well, it was Georgia, I think, many years before that. But the abuse of Black men at the hands of people in power is something that has continued throughout time in American history. But a few of those events, I think 3 all coming within 1 month during that summer, sort of coalesced into a common understanding across America that we had to do something. Again, we called on our core values that we have as a university that were determined, by the way, not by me at all. Our HR team reached out to all of our staff across the university and worked on what those values needed to be at that point in time for the university, which turned out to be great, honest, and focused. And we lived those values. And those values meant that we had to take a stand on certain issues, and we had to figure out how to take that stand. And Tandra, you and Sarah were instrumental in helping us get through that period by proposing that we had these types of webinars where we could share our experiences and talk openly about how do you deal with these issues of racial, social injustice, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And I think it was the ability for the university to be open, transparent, and react quickly to what happened at a certain point in time, and then to build on that. It has allowed us to continue to remain a university that is as inclusive as any university I'm aware of in the country, and as an organization that operates, one that is willing to speak openly, candidly. I love the slide that you guys have now put in the beginning of the seminar about respectful conversations. I think at one point you might ask us, like, what tips we would have for other people about how to demonstrate your own transparency, your own vulnerability, and your own approach towards inclusion. That's why it has it all. You know, being open to listening, recognizing you will be uncomfortable, understanding other people are coming from a place that's different than the place you came from, and recognizing, you know, the good fortunes you've had in life that not everybody else has had. And so I'll pause there because I've talked too long and let you pick up with Chris on this topic.
Chris, is there anything you would like to add? As our CFO at the time, I can imagine that some of what we dealt with during that time and even dealing with it is still as an executive leader from a financial standpoint. And we love the fact that one of the things I will share as a staff member here is our leadership broadcasts, as Chris said before, are open to everyone. So there is full transparency in what is happening at the university. Oftentimes we may get a message from Chris really quickly before even a leadership broadcast to make sure that before something is released in the media or some false pretense is put out there, we are well aware of what the reality is that is going on within our organization. So just wanted to transfer it over to you a bit, Chris, and talk about your experience as a CFO prior to going into this role. What was that like for you during that time, and how did that experience as a CFO influence your approach to leadership as a president?
Good question. Well, I guess there are a couple things during 2020 and during COVID. I think that, you know, Peter talked about the most amazing timing of our proactive approach to running the university and how that helped the transition to COVID. But really, the underlying culture, the brave, honest, focused, the awareness of what's most important. We've been on a journey. I haven't been at the university as long as you, Tandra, so you know what that journey looks like. But what I've learned at being in the university is at the core of this university, we've had thousands of people that have been focused on our core mission, and that's serving our students and doing it in a deeply empathetic way. So, what I really took from that situation and from a CFO lens, it was really amazing how quickly and easily we were able to make the right decisions. And it wasn't just as an executive team and with employees, but also with our board and our owners. The first thing I remember talking to Peter about and sort of explaining is like, we're going to take it. We were just a little bit of context. We've been in this transformation that started under Peter, and we were in the first year where we were pivoting back to growth. Like we were just getting excited. Like we literally had just made it happen. It was like the culmination of many years of work. Retention had improved dramatically for students, but our enrollment was healthily growing. That was a peak in March of 2020. But we didn't bat an eye. We just said, look, we're doing the right things, and our job is to take care of our employees and our students and just figure out how to get through this pandemic together. And we did that. I mean, and there were so many best practices and innovations. Our accessibility team did a phenomenal job just embracing best practices to apply to anyone affected by COVID. We were getting record numbers of accommodations. We were running financial scenarios, but nobody was getting bothered, from our board or our owners about whether or not our margins would degrade. We just realized the moment we were in, and we would all get through it together, and that how we approach this would make us an even stronger university when we came out of it. And so that was my biggest takeaway, is just the power of our culture and our ability to act quickly. And I think the other thing as it relates to this topic is, so there is a blessing in disguise with COVID. It was horrible, and it really affected our students that we serve in an outsized way. But one of the blessings for the university was we have this core competency, like the special ingredient to our success, which is we have a deep empathy first. I mean, people here, and I've really learned this over the years. I mean, we're all here for a reason. I mean, you'd just be amazed at our backgrounds and how it contributes to us being here. And the average tenure for all of you on this webinar of over 3,000 staff is 11 years. So you just do the math there. I mean, people have dedicated their careers here. But I think COVID took that up another level, because we were all online. We all got humanized. We're on Zoom. We brought each other into each other's houses as employees. We were talking about our dogs barking and our kids at home doing online learning. And like every conversation started with how our different experiences. We had a lot of people dealing with big challenges, and we were able to be there for our community in a different way. And so it gave us an opportunity to step into the shoes of our students. And really, I think, deepen that empathy that we already had. And now today, when we came out of COVID, it worked just as planned. The university's never been stronger. And a lot of it had to do with how we managed through that process.
I love that. You speak about the culture, and I think that is very important, is building a culture within any organization, making sure that employees are connected. I know that we have being someone who's been here for 23 years. And as you mentioned, many of my colleagues being here for many years as well. One of the reasons that we stick around is because there's opportunity, to move around and work within different roles and different areas within the institution. And what I have found is that during COVID, many of my colleagues that I've worked with for years, I learned so much more about them than I would have learned when we were in the office. And it was because we also implemented what we call our Inclusive Cafe series, which is similar to what we're doing here. It's a method for us to create cultural awareness, but it was a connection between employees. So it's limited to staff and faculty. It's a lot less formal. You see us all here in blazers. Most of us as employees will have on our t-shirts. We will see a few dogs or cats running across the screens, kids yelling in the background. And we're really talking about what we're going through, what we're carrying in that proverbial backpack, right? That we bring to work, but nobody can see what's in it. But we're still trying to perform. We're still trying to meet our goals. We're still trying to manage our households. And it's really important to have that level of empathy within an organization from both a management and a leadership perspective to ensure that your staff can actually continue to be productive while managing their everyday lives. And I do think we have a unique opportunity here because we're also dealing with adult learners. So as we're talking about culture and building this culture, I want to ask both of you what transparent and inclusive leadership means to each of you, and why do you believe it's critical from an executive level position?
You want to go first, Peter?
Sure, I'll go first. In terms of transparency, which again, I think is something that as you move up through management and move through management and become responsible for leading teams, either you determine that transparency is important and that having access to information allows people to make better decisions. And I see somewhere in one of these chats, someone was talking about vulnerability, and that there's some concern that if you are too open, it lets you be maybe vulnerable, which might be a risk. And you have to be comfortable with the idea of taking risk as a leader. And transparency means you have to be comfortable as an organization taking some risk that your information will be out there. When we say anything on a webinar, when we put anything into a document, I always assume it's going to be on the front page of the New York Times. And I just have to be comfortable with that. So it's not always going to be perfect, but I have to be able to defend it. So it's, the simplest approach is sort of radical transparency. Sometimes there are things you can't talk about. I think many people who are probably on the call know we've been going through a sale process at the university, and there were certain points during that process where we couldn't say anything because we were bound by confidentiality agreements. And if you tell people you can't say anything, people accept that. Again, if you've demonstrated transparency during a period of time, a long period of time, people begin to trust you for it. When you first start to be transparent, when I first got to the university and we began having town halls and we sort of started practicing transparency, for the most part, I got disbelief. And I told people we weren't going to have any more layoffs, because we'd had 7 years of layoffs. There was complete disbelief, and totally understandable. Hard to change 7 years of habits. And so you can't expect that overnight people flip a switch and believe everything you say when you move from a culture where information was controlled and maybe doled out according to power, and a culture where everybody knows what's going on, and you share with people a dashboard that shows you every important metric in the university that's available to every single staff member in the university. So to me, transparency means being able to provide that information in an open environment. It means being open and available for feedback, and not only asking for feedback, but embracing it and doing something with it. As all the people who are part of the university know, we've been doing 2 or 3 times a year, we do these surveys, the pulse surveys that allow us to know how people are feeling. And we have an open field in there that people can write anything they want in. And typically we get over 7,000 comments. And I used to read all 7,000 comments, which took me forever. Now I could use AI to read through all 7,000 comments, find all the commonality, and it would probably take about 25 seconds. So I'm very excited about the leverage of AI in education in general. But be available, be comfortable with feedback, leverage the feedback, use it, be visible, physically present, whether it's when you're in person in your company or your organization, walk the hallways, talk to people. Here, it's being present on screen. It's being open to conversations whenever anybody wants to talk to you about things, and communicating, over communicating. I think the transparency comes from people really believing that you'll answer their questions. We had open Q&As in every one of our town halls with anybody being able to ask any question, and we encourage the difficult questions. We didn't always have great answers, but we encouraged difficult questions so people knew that we were willing to talk about them. So that's kind of how I feel about the transparency side. I'll talk about inclusiveness, but before I do, I'll turn it over to Chris and let him talk about transparency and inclusiveness, and I can wrap up with inclusiveness.
Sure, thanks, Peter. Well, I mean, I agree with everything you said wholeheartedly. I guess when I reflect, you know, when I came to the university, I actually wasn't sure what to expect. And when I interviewed with Peter and got to know the executive team, like this may be a little different than I was anticipating, but I had worked pretty closely with some executives from many years ago, maybe the early days, Tandra, of your time here. And not picking on them, but in the environment I worked with them, it was sort of the opposite of how we operate here. It was information was very guarded. There were a lot of agendas in the organization. You never really knew. You couldn't see a consistency to what the overall organization wanted to accomplish, and different leaders' behaviors and actions. And so that actually defined a lot of, you know, as I rose up to an executive, that's a big reason why I was sort of the opposite. I've always been very focused on that radical transparency. I just believe, I talked about with this organization, you know, when you get in a virtuous cycle, you know, when you're doing the right things for students and they're getting the right outcomes, it benefits the university and you reinvest back. When you think of the world like that's easy when you get into that virtuous cycle to be radically transparent. And when you're doing that, I think really building trust, so that this is sort of something that I think is really important in our organization. We have a very high level of trust, and I really give Peter a lot of credit of building it up to a significant level. And then when I stepped into the role as president, I knew that I needed to maintain and grow that trust in the organization. And trust is powerful. Like when you trust the organization and the people you're working with, then you are your best self. And I think we all can relate to that. It ties into feeling included and feeling like that sense of belonging. And I think that we've done a good job of building trust, and we're in sort of a virtuous cycle. I don't want to pat ourselves on the back too much, but we're feeling the benefit of that. And just to sort of bolster some of the things Peter was saying around engagement scores. So I knew Peter read every one of those. I try to do it too. And I don't think AI has been as helpful, but you gain a lot of understanding of, are you actually doing the job? But we do a phenomenal job. You know, under Peter's leadership, our trajectory on engagement scores were going up. And I think when he left, we were like in the low 80s, which is way above the national benchmarks. And there was a high level of trust and confidence in the executive team and the president, which is, you know, those are those shoes to fill. I was like, geez, like it's going to be terrible if I come in and all of a sudden that thing, you know, falls off a cliff. But as it relates to, you know, we have a question. These are, you know, we have like 20 questions. Many of you who work here have filled it out, but inclusion, diverse perspectives are valued. That's one of our top scores. We have a great culture, just a simple statement, one of our top scores. Authenticity, I feel comfortable being myself at work, one of our top scores. Like we do a very good job of not only being transparent, but fostering this trust in the organization where people can speak their mind. They believe others are listening. They believe they can take action and make a difference. And I think that's super important for creating a transparent culture, but also creating an inclusive culture, and really the value that you get from it. If you just want to step back from a business perspective, organizations that where everyone feels like they belong, that have a high sense of transparency and trust, they just do better. Like all the statistics show you get more innovation, you get more cash flow, you get more growth. You know, I think that's, I don't remember the original question, but that's sort of been my view on how we do with transparency and inclusivity. And we're always improving. And I think as long as we're in that cycle, you know, of constantly improving on this, we're going to do all right.
Hey, Chris, you did answer both those questions. And just to add on a little bit on the inclusive side, I think recognizing that each of us as human beings is an aggregation of our lived experiences, our demographics, our social experiences, where we came from, our parents, etc. And that, we're each completely unique as individuals. You won't find anybody with exactly the same everything that anybody else has. We try to lump people into, broader groups, whether it's by race, sex, color, religion, gender, etc., because it's easier for us to sort of comprehend. But it's difficult, to be truly inclusive without knowing yourself, knowing your values, what you stand for, knowing what your non-negotiables are in life, and recognizing, and this is, I think, the hard part for people, it's hard for me, is recognizing how you do exclude others. We all prejudge everything in life. We prejudge the election, we prejudge other people, we prejudge a car. So the idea of prejudice in terms of prejudging is kind of innate in who we are. And so consciously trying to overcome that and say, how am I letting my experiences influence how I see you, is probably the first step to really trying to create an inclusive environment. So if you ask, what do you need to do to create an inclusive environment? It's you need to look inward. You need to look at yourself and what it is you're doing that would make somebody feel excluded, make them feel like they didn't belong, and then determine, do you like that about yourself, or are you going to do something about it? And now more than probably ever in the last many years, we are seeing the challenges of inclusivity and belonging across society. So I think we're kind of at a tipping point, and sadly, I think we're tipping the wrong way around inclusivity right now. And hopefully, we can get back to recognizing everybody has something of value to add, and we should. Somebody said in the chat, do you treat people like you would want to be treated, or do you treat people like you think they would want to be treated? And of course, if you can understand how they'd like to be treated, much better off treating them the way they want to be treated than how you think they should be treated, or how you want to be treated. How I want to be treated as a white male, with influence and power and affluence, is probably not how a lot of people want to be treated. And so my experience is not that relevant. I need to understand your experience and try to live where you are and understand where you're coming from. So it's a journey for sure. It's something we will never be perfect at. And I think that's in the very beginning of this whole seminar. There was that graphic that told you, how to respectfully have a conversation. We need a lot more respectful conversations in society right now, and it takes each one of us to do it. All right, that's my soapbox.
Wow, this is wonderful. Let me just say, the two of you have answered all of the questions that I had for you today, just in what you've shared. So we will have time to go to some of the questions that have been submitted by our participants. But before we do so, I want to highlight a few nuggets that both of you have given us, and make sure that everyone, as Saray asked them to take out their notebooks, for those of us who still use an actual notebook and write things down, to make sure that you're taking note of some of the things that were shared. So we have Chris Lynn, who is now the president of the University of Phoenix. This is a former CFO. You heard us read his bio and his extensive background in finance. He is telling you that the way to be successful is to make sure that you're leading with transparency. When you're building that trust, he demonstrated through numbers that he's seen here at the university how it has benefited the bottom line, to make sure that you're earning trust, that you gain retention. When people trust you, they'll buy from you. When people trust you, they'll work harder for you. I know personally, I've had leaders in the past who had extreme work ethics. And I thought to myself, I had so much respect for them. I wanted to work at the same level that they did. Or if I was not being as productive or efficient in certain ways, it made me want to work harder because of the leader that I was working for, the way that I was able to connect with them and share, but also make sure that there were some boundaries about what I was sharing, but have a level of empathy and understanding so that they understood that my entire life did not revolve around work. I still had a family, but I also needed to earn this salary to support that family. So when you have that support, I hope that our leaders who are here today, or our future leaders who are present with us today, heard that negative information Being supportive, being transparent and vulnerable with your staff is going to help your bottom line. And then as Peter stated, which I have to say, having extreme humility in sharing who you are and how you walk through this world, Peter, and having that intention of learning about others, that's very important. All of us, as Peter said, are walking with some level of biases, right? I am an African-American woman, so I do find that in life, there are some ways in which I'm kind of at the back of the line. As hard as I work and as many accolades as I receive, as much education as I receive, I'm still unfortunately going to be at the back of the line in some senses, right? But there is also a level of privilege that I carry. I may be an African-American woman, but as Peter and Chris have explained, I've been at this university for many years. The pandemic didn't disrupt the income of my household. That's a privilege. For those of us who are attending virtually right now, that's a privilege to have access to internet, to have a mobile device or a computer. We want to think more globally. I think sometimes we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We think about transparency. Transparency and vulnerability does not mean that you need to tell everyone everything that is going on with you. You want to share just enough to make that connection. And then we also think about diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's not, and forgive me, it's not all black and white, right? We need to consider the differences in abilities that we all have, those seen and unseen. We need to take into consideration the varying socioeconomic stages that we all have. And then also making sure that we're honoring our LGBTQ plus community. There's a lot of aspects to diversity. There's a lot of aspects to transparency. And there are boundaries that you can set there, but as leaders, making sure that you make a connection is where that intersectionality comes in. There may be something, we all may look very differently here as you're looking at your screen, but there are common threads throughout all of our lives that bring us together. But if we never share, we won't know what those common threads are. So as I'm talking about sharing and being transparent, I'm going to go to one of the questions that we had that I think was really good with the topic that we have. And then as we're talking about transparency and being open and honest, when do you think there's a limit to transparency? When you're being vulnerable and being transparency, what is being too transparent? And I'll present that question in two ways. So we've talked about our leadership broadcasts. And I've talked about how Chris sometimes will send a notice out to us in the interim between our leadership broadcasts to make sure that we're kind of ahead of some of the things that we might be hearing. So let's talk about being transparent and vulnerable as a person, as a human, to connect with your staff. And also, when you think about transparency, when do you have to set that boundary when oversharing could actually create some anxiety within your staff? So you have to look at those boundaries. So I'd love to hear from the two of you on how you set those boundaries and when can transparency or sharing be too much?
Well, I guess I'll start on this one because I don't really know the answer. To be honest, this is something that I think a lot about, though. You know, when you're in a leadership role, there's judgment. I mean, the baseline is what's going on in the organization. I think Peter described it very well. Like, where are we headed? How are we doing? How are the financials doing? And always thinking whatever we say is going to end up in the New York Times, or, you know, may be heard by some outside party that would like to look at what we say from a negative perspective. But I think it goes beyond, Tandra, to the point you're making about vulnerability. Like when you share the personal side, the stuff that helps you get more connected into an organization or helps build trust at like that next level. That's a tough one that I think good leaders will wrestle with often. You know, I've shared a little bit about my background. When I started in this role, I had another moment. You know, I remember Peter and the COVID experience and sharing that. I decided to share a little bit about why I'm in this industry. And, you know, I grew up poor. I had a single mother. I had reasons why this mission means a lot to me. Didn't get too into it, but I shared it. And that opened up droves of responses in the organization. And I learned so much about so many people. But there's a limit, right? Like where you're just, talking about what's going on in your life with people that you work with. I'll tell you, it took about 18 months before we had an offsite retreat as an executive team. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to do this or not, but I started the retreat with vulnerability. Like I came back to that because I see trust and our ability to continue to build on the trust is critical. And I was noticing some elements of, you read the engagement scores and you see little pockets of perception around how we're running the university. And I wanted to have open conversations about that. And so I made a judgment call, and it was amazing. I started and I shared a little bit about where I'm coming from, and I learned something very personal about every person on our executive team. We had a little cone of silence. Won't share any of it here. But I saw that as a leapfrog moment because I just saw people understood each other differently. And that was a really important moment to reflect on sort of how we work together and where we're coming from and, what's important to us and why we may approach things differently. But I'll tell you, all those moments can backfire. So like, that's where, I started this with, I don't know. But I think when you have a genuine interest in moving things forward with people, and you have true empathy for the people that you're working with, and you're looking to build that connection that moves us forward, I think you're more likely to make the right calls in the right moment, and grow that confidence to be vulnerable as a leader at the right moments. So that's what I can offer, but I want to hand it to Peter.
Chris, I would agree with you. First, I don't think there is any answer to this question. It really is, at least for me, I would look at, will my comments or my vulnerability add value to the conversation? Is it something that other people, could benefit from hearing? Is it appropriate? Which again, Chris, goes to your comment about, there's some things maybe you don't share. You guys, don't want to hear about, personal issues with my sex life if I had any. It's like, that's not appropriate. So you have to kind of think, what is appropriate for the conversation? And are you comfortable sharing something? And it's okay to be a little uncomfortable sharing, but if you would again think that this is not something I really would want the world to hear about, then probably not appropriate to share it. In terms of the university, there we can be much more specific, and there are very clear lines of what we can and can't share. And I would err on the side every time of sharing every possible thing we can. And sometimes we have a wonderful lawyer in Srini Mehdi, who would say, hey, maybe we can't share that right now because we have this document in place that says you can't share it. But otherwise, I would err on the side of more information is good information for people to do their jobs. But on the personal side, I think Chris hit it on the head. Try to figure out if you think it's appropriate for people to know that, and then take a little bit of risk with yourself internally when it's the first few times you're doing it, and you'll probably find that it's okay.
Thank you. We have a lot of questions that came in, and I do apologize, we don't have time to cover them all. I do want to kind of wrap us up here and state that I hope that everyone who attended today took some of these nuggets of information and you'll have the opportunity to apply them as a leader or as an employee within an organization. I think everything that was shared here is something we can all do, whether you're in the C-suite, whether you're a mid-level management, or whether you're a staff member. We can all choose when and how we want to be transparent and vulnerable. Just recapping some of the things that were shared today, check your biases, and step outside of your comfort zone. So Peter mentioned something, stretch yourself. It's important to be uncomfortable. I will say personally, I try to put myself in environments that are going to make me stretch and learn. If I'm too comfortable and it's too familiar, I'm not growing. And we want to continuously grow. If we're hearing the same perspectives of our circle and we're not stepping outside of our normal spheres of influence, it doesn't offer any insight into what others are dealing with outside of that. And how can we learn? How can we grow? And how can we achieve that true inclusiveness that Peter was talking about before? Peter, Chris, I want to thank you both so much for participating in our webinar today, for having this discussion with me. I want to thank you for allowing me to moderate the discussion. As a staff member, former faculty member, and an alum, I have great pride in being able to have this discussion with the two of you, so I thank you. And I'll now turn it back over to Saray.
Thank you, and thank you both. Truly humbled. You are the reason that we're able to bring these webinars to not just our University of Phoenix students, faculty, and staff, but to the public. They've now become international, at a global scale, and it is thanks to your leadership. We're honored, we're humbled for your time, and thank you for sharing everything that you have shared. And we want to encourage everyone to join us next month. And here's my cat, a great coworker of mine. But you will see a link in the chat for you to join the webinar next month in August, and we hope to see you all there. We'll be sharing the recording with all of you soon. Thank you.